Hi, today I want to do a book review of a book that is coming out within the next 2 weeks, April 19th, and it is David Platt's new book, Radical Together, which is more about how the church lives out a radical lifestyle that is totally devoted to Jesus. And if you haven't read his first book, Radical, I would suggest you also get that one. And this kind of builds on Radical, but since it's Radical Together, it's talking more about how we can't apply the lessons from this book and just be Lone Ranger Christians, but we need to do it within the Christian body. And it challenges us to unite around a gospel-centered vision in our small Bible study groups, in our church, in our families. You know, when I first started reading this book, I was thinking, well, this is great, but it's really only for pastors. And I plan to give this copy to one of my pastors at my church. But I was thinking this only applies to church leadership. But then I started thinking, I am a church leader because I lead my family. You know, I have a wife and daughter, and I am the pastor over my house. So I think Dad should read this book to say, how does this apply to our family? And if you desire to have an impact in this world for God's glory, I would read this book. Now he has 5 principles he builds everything on, and I'll read those to you real quick. He builds it just says this book is organized around 6 ideas that are not exhaustive, but he says as a pastor working out the implications of the gospel in his local church, he do believe these ideals are essential. And the first thing is the worst enemy of Christian is good things in the church. And then the second is the gospel saves us from work. The gospel that saves us from work saves us to work. And then number 3 is the word does the work. Number 4 is building the right church depends on using all the wrong people. Number 5 is we are living and longing for the end of the world. And then number 6 is we are selfless followers of a self-centered God. Now I included these 5 points down in the text portion of this post, and just a real quick summary of all of them so you can read that there. But that's kind of the basics of how he outlined this whole book. But basically, it asks the question that every church should ask, every family should ask, and this is mainly on the first point, but what we're doing, is it the best thing we could be doing to spread the gospel to the lost world? And that's what I got out of this book, that I need to be asking that in my family, in my business, in other things I'm doing, everything I'm involved in. I need to ask, you know, because 1 Corinthians 10:31 tells us to do all things for the glory of God. It says whether we eat or drink, whatever we do all to the glory of God. And we all need to be asking that question, is what we're doing the most effective, the best thing we can be doing to take the gospel to our world or where God has put us? And that means that some good things may have to go. And he talks about that in this book, and that is a struggle there. And I think everybody should read this along with Radical. They kind of go together. If you haven't read Radical, you could read this one first or read that one, but read them both. They're both short. I read both of them in a course of 2 or 3 days. And I read this one over a weekend, and I'm going to go back and reread it again. And then another idea I got out of this is that one of the challenges he does, and I like it because he uses real life stories. It's not you should do this, but he gives you real life stories of how his church or people in his church or people around the world are doing this. But the other point I got from this book is that we need to intentionally use whatever as an avenue to share the gospel. And the thing I'm looking is, how do I use my business to intentionally share the gospel with those that I work with or my clients, at the same time being a business person? Because that's not always easy. Because when I was working at a retail store, I remember somebody who shared the gospel all the time on the company clock and never did any of the company work. And to me, that was a bad witness. But how do we become intentional in our relationships with sharing the gospel, our friendships, or if you're in a soccer league or your kids play soccer or baseball? how can we take the normal activities of life and become intentional in sharing the gospel. And then I think the last thing in this review, and I'm going to add some of the text, I'm going to add some of my favorite quotes from the book. And then he tends, what I got out of this is there's a lot of questions he asked that we need to pray through, and we just need to go back and pray through them. So I'm going to list some of those questions that God convicted my heart on that I'm kind of praying through at this time. But if you are a follower of Christ who desires to live out a more biblical gospel, and you want to see your church do the same, or if you're a church pastor or a leader of a Sunday school or a leader of a Bible study that desires to see that group live out the gospel, I believe this book would help you get there. And what I'm doing as a result of this, and this is a quote from the book, I've just taken it and made it a prayer, is I'm asking God to make my life count where I live for the gospel and declare His glory to the ends of the earth. And I don't know what that looks like today, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, but I am going to pray through it and go through it. And I'm actually taking this book and Radical and going through them and journaling and challenging myself, and I'm going to be trying some things. So if you want to join that list, because I'm not going to post all those on the blog, you can join the list below, and basically that's what the list is going to be, an email periodically that is just going through these struggles. Because I really believe that Radical Together will teach you how to do it within the body of Christ, and then Radical kind of goes with it and sets the stage personally. And I'm just going to go through both of them this next year and really think. These are two books that you want to read over and say, how do I apply this to my life? So I encourage you to hit the link. I have an Amazon link down there. I have a link to a retailer. If you hit the Amazon link, you may buy me a Coke next week because it is an affiliate link. But go get this book. Pre-order it so you can have it when it comes out in a couple weeks. But I encourage you to get it, read it, give it to your church leadership. If you are a church leader, do some of your staff meetings around this book. It'll radically challenge you and help you to see God's bigger picture in some areas. So I highly recommend this book. And then again, if you haven't got the first book, Radical, go get this book also.